You're listening to A Capella, the podcast that delves into the history of classical music. In a 3-part series, we will travel through time and discover the childhood of the iconic Frédéric Chopin. Let's find out where his gift and love for music comes from. Enjoy your listening!
All those who love Chopin will be happy to discover a podcast in several episodes entirely devoted to his childhood and youth. Chopin is a remarkable example of early maturity. Before the age of 20, he had reached his full spiritual growth. The rest of his life was devoted to the search for artistic perfection. For instance, by his 20th anniversary, he had already composed his 2 concertos, his first etude, and sketched his first scherzo and his first ballade. Chopin's entire personality was formed in his youth, and his body of work is rooted in those early years in Poland. His family, his friend, the high school he attended, the typically Polish settings in which he lived, remained the living source of his inspiration, the cornerstone of his entire being until the end of his life. Let's start by traveling in time to meet Frédéric's father, Nicolas Chopin. Nicolas Chopin was born in France, in Lorraine, on April 15, 1771. His father was a wheelwright, fixer of animal-drawn vehicles, and a wine grower. At 17, Nicolas completed his secondary education and left France for Poland. By a quirk of history, these countries were linked. The region of Lorraine had been ruled for some time by the King of Poland, who owed his throne to his son-in-law, Louis XV, King of France. The good King Stanislas had made himself famous in the French province by his skills in governing. He founded schools, introduced legislative reforms, looked after the welfare of the people without ever forgetting Poland. Perhaps the fame of this leader, who died before Nicolas was born, or the influence of the large Polish colony residing in Lorraine, explained the voluntary exodus of this young Frenchman who was going to seek his fortune in a country so far away. Nicolas Chopin arrived in Warsaw towards the end of 1787. He had a few volumes of Voltaire, a violin, a flute, and a heart full of hope. He became the accountant of a small tobacco factory owned by another Frenchman. He struggled with figures and calculation all day long. Only in the evening did he have the time to visit the Polish capital. On January 23rd of 1793, Poland, under Prussian rule, underwent its second partition. The country was going through hard times and was dying. People deserted the cities. The tobacco factory was closed. After spending 6 years in Poland, Nicolas was depressed by a sense of personal failure. Illness prevented him from returning to France, and when he recovered, new events made him change his plans. Poland did not accept the new partition and turned against the foreign aggressor. Minds were motivated by ideals of freedom. A revolutionary uprising in 1794 was coming. With the speed of lightning, the news of a Polish army of 320 peasants armed with seats who overcame 2 Russian generals spread through the capital. The people of Warsaw, led by a cobbler, a butcher, and a priest, rose. The Russians were pushed out. Carried away by the collective joy, Nicolas gave his plan of going back to France and instead got enrolled as a soldier of the insurrection. For 6 months and until the end of the uprising, Nicolas served in the Warsaw militia. He was promoted to the rank of officer and became more and more like the Polish people. The foreign cause was now his. He was ready to defend the country at the risk of his life. The following year, in 1795, Poland was split for the 3rd time. The king surrendered, Poland ceased to exist as an independent state, and Warsaw fell under German occupation. Nicolas Chopin decided to return to France, but once again, his plans were stopped by illness. He concluded that Providence wanted him in Poland, and once he had recovered, he gave up the idea of living. He began to teach French for a living and had to fight against poverty and survive. Little by little, he succeeded in making himself known and was invited to the homes of families in the region. The ex-accountant and former officer now sought to earn a living as a tutor, a person responsible for educating at home a child of a noble or wealthy family. Having spent his youth in a joyless and troubled country, he had acquired strength of character and endurance. This Frenchman had shared the hardships of Poland and had known the bitterness of a fair but desperate struggle. Such training made him steady and tenacious, the kind of spirit that, having set a goal, stick to it at all costs, and that failures reinforce the will to make it. Inspired by his Polish mistress, Franz Liszt described la Polonaise, a traditional dance and its people. This dance is a manifestation of the noblest feelings and tradition of ancient Poland. We are struck by their unshakable determination and solemnity, the innate traits of the great Polish icons. These beliefs and traditions come with a fighting spirit. Courage and chivalry are associated with a carefree spirit. The Polish woman radiates a calm and prudent strength, and seems to convey the image of the Polish of the past that we find in their chronicles. People with broad and strong shoulders who boasted a keen intelligence, piety, and enormous courage. People who were courteous and gallant on the field, before and after the battle. This probably explained why he identified so well with this country. He was never to return to France, and he lost all connection with his family. Such knowledge of history allows us to understand better the heroic aspect of Frédéric Chopin's music that is rooted in the epic history of the Polish people, a history intertwined with the destiny of his father, Nicolas. Nicolas Chopin set out for Żelazowa Wola, where he was to take up his duties as a tutor at Count Kasper Skarbek Castle. The Skarbek estate was about 50 kilometers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Capella, the podcast provided by Classical Music Reference Recording. What did you think of this content? Share your opinion with our community of classical music lovers on YouTube and Patreon. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and Patreon through the links featured in the description. Feel free to spread the word about us to your loved ones. See you soon for a new episode. Thank you for the love of classical music.